Minutes ago, I was on a call last night. I got together with some old friends from Chicago, with whom I set up a book group years ago. And one of those people goes all the way back to the bank training program. I met her in 1986, and we're still really good friends. It turned out while I was at the bank that I gravitated to working with nonprofit organizations, hospitals, universities, and so on. And ended up working in the bank's community relations department, working with local nonprofits. So I took the plunge and joined a startup nonprofit organization that is still in existence. So I'm very proud of that fact. There were 5 of us when we started, and it's still a thriving group based in Chicago, working across the Midwest. Later, I worked for the University of Chicago and the Chicago Transit Authority, and I've been in St. Louis working at WashU since 2006. So I've been here for quite a while. And I have to talk about Delta Sig for a minute. I was initiated at Kappa Omicron, now Missouri State. It was a multi-chapter initiation in 1983. I had to get my big brother's names in there, and I have to say my big brother, my little brother, Bill Newberry, was the National Collegian of the Year in 1987, and I'm really proud of him. I wouldn't be a true iota new if I didn't boast for at least 5 seconds about our chapter. We're so proud of it, and we have won the best chapter in the nation multiple times, including this past year. We've had just great experiences with the chapter and so proud of it. I did serve on the National Board of Directors for 2 years right out of college, and I'm graduated to the Golden Council at the age of 24. So I was fairly young to be on the Golden Council, but it's been a great experience to be affiliated with the university. I thought I'd start with a thought about what work means, and it means different things to different people. And this particular quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson may strike some folks as being a little bit, I don't know, a little bit dismal, but I think that it really does fit for many people that I work with in nonprofit organizations. They really want to be useful, and they are able to use their personal compassion and their skill sets toward making a difference in the world. And I want to also say, as I talk about mission-based work, I want to be very clear that working in private industry is not the opposite of mission-based work. I think especially right now, as we think about all the things around COVID, we're all very dependent and reliant on the wonderful things happening at companies like Pfizer and Moderna and all the industries that are working to bring us vaccines and the tools we need to get out of the pandemic. So mission-based work is not the opposite of private industry, but it's often used as a term that's applied to the public sector and nonprofit organizations. Opportunities are all over the place. I was listening to the news about 2 weeks ago, and there was a comment about the economy, and the person who was talking about the importance of they were talking about the importance of state and local governments. And it turns out, and I didn't know this, 13% of the US workforce works for state or local governments. That's a huge percentage of the workforce. And when we think about it, all the services that states and local governments provide, it perhaps isn't that surprising. But for people who are thinking about careers or work opportunities, one of the key points I'd like to make is that often these jobs are not as obvious on a college campus as they can be to as other industry jobs are, because your local government or your local YMCA probably doesn't have the resources to participate in activities that are organized by the career centers at various campuses. Big companies have the resources, they have a very well-oiled machine in terms of recruiting, but there are just literally millions of jobs and millions of wonderful opportunities that are available through other organizations that perhaps require a bit more work on behalf of the applicant. So I have some examples here of the kinds of organizations. I work in higher education, I've worked in government before. Associations such as Delta Sigma Pi, also very robust set of job opportunities and career paths there. And there are big organizations that we think of when we think of nonprofits, like the United Way and the American Red Cross. The kinds of work in those organizations really appeals to many of the skill sets that we have among the brothers in Delta Sig. And you can see I've listed a number of types of jobs there, but really having good finance and accounting skills, good critical thinking skills, provide really lots of the base skills that are needed in organizations, whether they're private industry, for-profit jobs, or whether they're in government or in traditional nonprofits like 501c3s, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. This slide may be a little hard to see, but what it says is it provides the largest U.S. charities, and this is ranked by private support. So this means this is the revenue stream coming from gifts to those organizations. And some of those names look quite familiar. Some of them might not be as familiar, but when you think about the size of those organizations and the amount of funding they receive, and really nonprofits have a responsibility to consider how to reinvest the gifts that they get into the work that they've set up, that their mission is set up to do. And so to spend all that money and to really serve the community, these organizations typically have very large workforces and many career opportunities within them. This is just a bit about nonprofit organizations. Nonprofits are so designated as by the Internal Revenue Service. There's an application process that organizations can go through, and there are a couple of designations. I've only identified here two. 501c3s are charities that we tend to think of as most common charities. And 501c4s are mutual benefit organizations. There are other set of 501c5, 6, 7. I won't talk about those tonight, but there are many types of organizations. And of particular interest is the note, the third, or at least interest to me, because I actually think this stuff is pretty interesting, but the third bullet talks about religious congregations. And so because of back to the Constitution, the separation between church and state, religious congregations are not regulated in the same way as other nonprofits. Those also, some of them are huge and robust organizations that have great big workforces and the need to hire people with considerable, many types of skills. This is an impossible to read slide, and that's why I'll make these slides available to you if you'd like them. But this is a chart put together by the Nonprofit Quarterly. And the purpose of the slide is to show the sources and then the, if you will, uses and types of organizations that are part of the nonprofit economy. The nonprofit economy is enormous. You can see where the money comes from at the top, and you can see it's directed to the green circles in the bottom, but it just gives you a sense of the size and complexity of this particular part of the U.S. economy. The United States is somewhat unique in this, in that we provide so many services through this nonprofit sector. And again, it's a really interesting and complex area, also related not only to the services, but to a lot of public policy questions that we wrestle with throughout our government policies and thinking about organizational missions. So the question is, with all those organizations out there, how do you find a job? And what are the best ways to find those opportunities? As I said, career service offices at the universities may not be the best source because some of these organizations just don't have the resources to get out there and recruit. So I have a couple of thoughts, and I think maybe we'll draw on some of the other people who've joined us in the audience here who might have some suggestions as well, but this is where I would start. Informational interviews are essential. I find them essential whether you're looking at private industry or at mission-based organizations, and it is a wonderful way to build relationships. And there's an entirely different quality and creativity to the conversation when someone comes in and wants to talk and have an informational interview, as opposed to someone who's sitting there with a resume saying, I need a job and I need a job right now. You may in fact need a job right now, but sometimes the best way to learn about jobs that are perhaps not yet posted, or perhaps just more informally available within the community, is to get in and just have an informational interview. And I can talk more about that in the Q&A if you'd like me to. There are large organizations in your community, and you can determine where they list jobs, and I'm going to have a couple of examples in just a minute. If you, in your community, you're just not sure where to start in terms of looking for nonprofit opportunities, my suggestion would be to call your local United Way or similar organization And again, try to get some information from them about whether there is a local posting board for nonprofit jobs. There are often very informal boards set up. Again, all of this is on on the internet, and it's a great way to get into that list and figure out what's out there in your community. But often the people at United Way are well informed because they are in fact giving community contributions to those organizations and tend to know how they're set up. I have a couple of examples here of the types of organizations that are out there to help recruit and find applicants for jobs, and I would be remiss if I didn't start with the Higher Education Recruitment Consortium, known as HERC. And my next slide shows the list of HERCs all over the United States. I picked the one that serves the greater Missouri area here. Higher education institutions are able to join the HERC and list their jobs. So if, and this was originally set up as a service to help dual career couples who both work in universities. So it is the case sometimes one partner will receive an offer in an area and the university that they're moving to may not be able to respond with an offer in the other partner's field. And so this was a way for universities to basically make it easy for partners to follow each other and to find opportunities in the same geographic area. But you don't have to be affiliated with a university or really, involved in that market at all to use this service. I recommend it all the time to people. It includes not just higher education institutions, but also some private, often high schools. St. Louis has a lot of private high schools and private schools, and those organizations also list their jobs here as well. This slide is just a snip of the bottom of the web page, and it shows regional HERCs all over the country. You can imagine some of them are very robust, especially the HERC that serves upstate New York, where there are multiple universities, and New England. Think about all of the schools that are in Boston, in that general area. So if you are looking for parts of the country that are on this list, it's a great resource to check out. The other thing is, as I said, many smaller communities have community-based lists. So I happen to pick one that's very popular in St. Louis. The Rome Group is a consulting group, and they are filling a niche by having a career board. Organizations, Washington University uses this for some jobs, can post jobs for quite a reasonable fee. It doesn't cost very much. So a lot of smaller nonprofits use it. And I just pulled up some sample jobs that are open right now. You can get a sense of what's out there, but there are many, many of these kinds of organizations all over the country. When I was preparing for this presentation, I just simply went into 2 cities and found 2 right away. I typed in Cincinnati, and there you go. There's a website there that lists jobs. It also appears to be a consulting firm that someone has set up and does this as a service. And then you can see Colorado. I typed in Denver. I found this, which covers the entire state. So I think that in most localities, unless they're very, very small, nonprofits really do work together, and this is exactly the kind of collaboration you'd see as they all are looking to find people with special skills for the jobs that they need to fill. And then I just picked the United Way, a very large national organization, and go to their website, and you can see off to the left there that you can sort by location in the country and also other kinds of employment. So I just pulled these as examples. But you can get a sense of what's out there by these examples. So one of the things that I talk with my students about, so I have the really fun opportunity to teach a class at Washington University's night program called University College, and I teach a class in financial management for nonprofit organizations. And students, of course, are interested in working, interested in thinking about organizations. And so part of what we talk about is how do you learn a little bit about an organization before you go in and talk to that employer? Whether you're really there for a full job interview or you're there for an informational interview, nonprofits, because they have this designation, which is granted by the federal government, have very specific rules that they have to follow about making information available. And of course, governmental agencies are subject to freedom of information regulations, and so they have to make things available, which include what jobs are paid, and other information that is useful to a job seeker. It's sometimes a little hard to find these things out. Turns out nonprofits have a lot of information that's available to them. So here are some places you can go look. If you aren't familiar with nonprofit organizations and their structure and what some of the rules are around them, the IRS has wonderful information, and really, it has a wonderful website that's set up for charities and nonprofits. It's a good way to get just a little bit of basic education about those organizations. I'll talk about the rest of these as I give some examples here. So here's the IRS website. There is, I don't know if you can see my cursor here or not, but the charities and nonprofits is this particular section. There's a lot of information about how to organize them, life cycle, and so just a great way to get information before you walk in the door for an interview. Charity Navigator is known for rating organizations. Charity Navigator has a set of formulas that it uses to calculate, based on the financial aspect of the organization and some other criteria, whether they're a good nonprofit or on whether they use the gifts well that people make to them. That's also a great way to get background information about organizations. The Charity Navigator, as an organization, allows nonprofits to submit information about themselves to their website, and so it's a great way for you to get a lot of information about organizations. Now, that said, Charity Navigator probably only rates about 10,000 organizations in the United States, and you'll remember the slide that showed we have about 1.5 million nonprofits in the U.S., but larger organizations are on Charity Navigator and worth a look. To illustrate a couple points I wanted to make, I just picked Livestrong as a nonprofit to spend a moment talking about. And I don't know anything about them. I thought they had a good website and some good shots for me to use, so there you have it. But you'll notice in the lower, along the bottom of the slide, 2018, 2017, 2016 is a little covered up. I kind of blew up what that to make it easier to read, but 2018 shows links to the annual report for the organization. Annual reports are a required document that nonprofits must provide. They used to be in print form. Now most of them are posted online. There is a set of information within the annual report. It is very much a marketing document, but it can be quite useful in terms of the information provided. The IRS 990 is a required report that nonprofits must file each year with the IRS, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And I assume everybody on the call is familiar with audited financial statements. Nonprofits of any size do go through a regular audit, and that information is often posted for the public to see. And I think one of the most useful things in reading any audit is looking at the notes in the audited statement. So always worth a look. You can find out all kinds of good things about an organization, or things that might make you think about whether it's the right organization for you to work for. I pulled some shots from the Livestrong 990 from 2018, and I recognize this is probably so small you can't see some of the stuff, but I'll point out a couple things. So this document is available. Pull it right up on the web and looked at it, and you can see it has prior year and current year financial information. And when I look at my screen here, and I can see that when you look at their revenue less expenses, a fairly basic figure, prior year they lost $6.2 million, and the current year they lost $11.5 million. Now that doesn't necessarily mean they're about to go out of business, but even nonprofits can't go without a profit for a period of time and stay in business. So you find out a lot of things about organizations through the 990. One of the other really great things that my students love to see on the 990 is, and I have two examples of this, part of the 990 requires disclosure about key positions, and key positions that are paid at over $100,000 a year must disclose the compensation for those individuals. So you see people here listed with their compensation, and further in the document in Schedule J, you can see it breaks it down a little bit between base compensation and benefits and some other things. This can be really valuable information because it helps you get a sense of the organization, what the pay may be. Obviously, lower jobs or jobs that are perhaps not holding as much responsibility aren't going to be listed here, but it begins to give you an idea of what the organization looks like. The final thing I'll say about the 990 is the Schedule O. And, excuse me, my students, often I can tell the students who've read the materials that I ask them, we use a lot of actual organization documents in the class, and the ones who walk in who are very excited to talk about this week's stuff, I can tell they've made it all the way through the IRS 990 to the Schedule O, because I tend to pick organizations that have had some interesting or not great things going on. The Schedule O is usually a wealth of information. It talks about lawsuits or situations that the organization has been in that's had to disclose. So in this case, Livestrong, frankly, is pretty boring, just a pretty typical Schedule O, but this is also a great place to check if you're looking at a nonprofit and thinking about employment. Look at this, you'll learn a lot about what they've had to air in terms of their dirty laundry. It's really hard to get information because many of these organizations are not covered in the media, and so going to their publicly available documents can be among the best ways to get information. So some thoughts here about what to ask potential employers. In fact, in many respects, these questions are the same whether they would be in private industry or in a not-for-profit. The organization culture and values. Always good to hear people who are working in the organization describe what those are. Understanding a little about professional development. Some smaller organizations may not have the same structure or resources that private industry has, especially early career. So understanding what opportunities are there that might be paid for by the organization, or perhaps they're not covering the cost of perhaps a conference, but they might give time off to employees to participate in those kinds of activities. But those are good questions to ask. Another question would be about the organizational governance, which for nonprofits typically means a board, and that strategic planning process. Understanding the role of the board in the organization, whether the position you're talking with the organization about works closely with the board or has an opportunity to work for board committees. That is a way to gain experience and mentorship from people who are outside the organization but close to it because they're on the board. It's just good information to have. Employee evaluations, what success looks like, and the frequency of compensation review. And I think it's appropriate to ask, it's okay to ask about perhaps average raises in the last few years. Some smaller organizations may not follow merit pay in the way we think of with private organizations. They may tend to provide raises to the staff if they have the ability to provide a raise that tend to be more on the average for the whole organization as opposed to individual compensation that's rated separately. So those are just good things to know as you're getting to know an organization. So I'm gonna, the question about that I think is most important about an organization or a job search is thinking about what's really important to you. As I said at the very beginning, mission-based organizations offer a lot of opportunity, but private industry also offers a lot of opportunity, and much of it is very fulfilling work. So it's really thinking about what place you think is best for you. And I think it's important to have a little bit of perspective too, that working is working. And I've worked in private industry, I've worked for government, I've worked for nonprofit, and I would say all of the good things and all the bad things about work are true everywhere because people are people. And there are people who work in mission-based organizations who are gung-ho about the mission and very dedicated and focused on it. And there are people who work in mission-based organizations who feel that it's a really good job and they appreciate the mission, but it's not the thing that gets them up in the morning and gets them into the office. And whether no matter where you're working, a big deadline or a crisis that cuts into your personal life is just no fun, no matter what. Nonprofit organizations can be very complex organizations. They can have a lot of constituents, clients, donors, the IRS, public opinion, and so on. So And again, that's also true of private industry. So I have, over the years, people have talked with me about perhaps leaving a more corporate setting and coming into a nonprofit setting. And when I really talk with them, I really try to get them to talk about what it is that they're trying to change about their situation. And sometimes the things that perhaps frustrate them are not necessarily things that are about that particular type of organization, but frankly, it's just about what it means to work anywhere. And sometimes the mission-based organization may not solve that challenge for them. So it's really about thinking about what you want. And really, this is the last thing I'll put up here on the board, and then I'll stop sharing, but it's just thinking about your long-term professional goals and your long-term financial responsibilities and your goals, your personal values and your personal mission. It's also important to recognize that many people make a big contribution to the nonprofit community and governmental community by taking up responsibility as a board member, a volunteer, or elected officials. Some of the people I think are going directly to heaven are people who serve on public school boards. That is one of the most challenging and most important responsibilities, elected positions, and just grinding, thankless, but hard work, but really important to the community. And those jobs are unpaid, they're volunteer. Many of the folks work in private industry. So I think the question for any of us as we think about work is where we would thrive. And I'm going to pause. I'll stop sharing and happy to open it up to questions, comments, observations from our wonderful audience.
You're welcome to turn your mics on, your cameras on, whatever you'd like to have a conversation. Jackie?
Hi, Susan. Thank you for coming and speaking to us. This was really awesome. So I'm a collegiate brother, and I was wondering, does this same sort of look into the nonprofit for jobs, like that sort of thing? Does that also apply to looking for internships and that sort of I guess part?
Yes, I think a lot of the things. So Jackie, what part of the country are you from?
I'm at UNC in Greeley in Colorado.
Terrific. That's great. So I would say a lot of the comments and notes that I have here are really very applicable to internships. I think you can find internships by networking. I think you can take a look. There may be internships that are posted on those kinds of local job sources that I mentioned. And I do think that college campuses often do post more internships that can be nonprofit related. So that's actually a good place to start, is starting with your campus office. And if they don't have a lot of resources, they probably know. Again, I don't know if you're looking for an opportunity close to where you're going to school, but if you are, that's a good place to start. The other thing, so I think it does apply, yes.
Awesome, thank you.
It's great to see some IOTA news on the call and some IOTA news that I know are also working in mission-based organizations. It's great to see you guys. Observations from you about your experiences, Karen or Liz or Amy?
Karen, go first.
Yeah.
Hi, Liz.
Hi.
So let's see. So I've worked in a number of different industries, and for me, it has been more. I found more fulfillment in things that are, I will say, people-based, which were not necessarily always mission-based. Like I worked for Citicorp Acceptance when I started out of college, and they did car loans and mobile home loans, so there were people connected to that. And I worked for a Blue Diamond Growers, which is a cooperative of farmers. So, and a cooperative is, I don't know if I would call them mission-based necessarily, but kind of.
Yeah.
But I worked in a large or a small global investment firm for a while, and it had like $5 million minimum account sizes. So I felt like there was no connection to people whatsoever in that job. And I found I was very unhappy there. And so that's when I thought, okay, I got to find something definitely mission-based. So I went to work for a hospital group, and that was fulfilling for a while until it started feeling less mission-based. and more corporate. And now I work for a not-for-profit that does early childhood home visiting. So, and I found that through the Rome group. I put that in the chat. That was where I went to look to find a not-for-profit job here in St. Louis. So that's been kind of my arc. And I mean, part of it too is I was in a position, fortunately, now later in my career, that I could find something more that I wanted to do and take less money for doing it. So I was very fortunate that that was not my driver at this point in my career. So I could kind of take a step back for the job I wanted without worrying about making as much. So because there is definitely a give and take with those kinds of jobs.
Mhm. Liz, do you want to add thoughts to that?
Sure. So my career started after college primarily in a sales aspect. And again, like Karen, I like the people interaction and creating those relationships. But after, I'm going to age myself here, 20 some years of sales and numbers and quotas and all that good stuff. Yeah, I was ready to do something that I just felt more passionate about. And so I wish I had, had Susan's presentation before when I was trying to get into nonprofit, because everyone told me you don't have any nonprofit experience. And that was so frustrating because I have found, now that I've been with the nonprofit for 3 years, that so much of my business experience relates to what I'm doing as a development manager. And it's a very small organization. We have 6 full-time, 5 part-time folks. We serve adults that have developmental disabilities, and we're all about social skills, which has been very eye-opening for me, that these families really rely on our organization to help their children. And by children, they could be anywhere from 21 to 65. We have served people for a long time. So our organization is very near and dear to these families' hearts. But back to what I was saying, so it's a small organization. I get my hands into fundraising. I get my hands into the finances with our executive director. She's great. She's very willing to share information. And I get to do the social media, which I'm still learning, but I'm excited about that. So I have a lot of different opportunities within the organization. But I think really what I was going to say, though, about Susan's presentation, the whole networking thing, we hear about networking from early on, probably your junior year of college, at least, maybe even high school, you're told to network so you can find those internships, so you can, create relationships for other opportunities aside from necessarily a career. But yeah, I had been looking on Rome Group. I'd been talking to people. I met this executive director at a volunteer situation I was working, and I was talking to her, and I was really curious because she had left a larger nonprofit as a VP to be the executive director of this organization. And she was very honest. She said it was all about the quality of life that she was wanting for her family. And because I had been considering a job at the large nonprofit, and she kind of talked me out of it. Not that, I mean, I didn't have a job offer, but I really wanted to apply for this, and she gave me her feedback and her honest opinion, and it's really been a great fit for me. I've had a lot of opportunity. It's been fun. I've learned a lot, and I'm enjoying it. And in my the end of my sales career, I wasn't enjoying it. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Liz. Hey, Nick, you're on here with us. You have any questions or thoughts you want to share from the collegiate perspective in California?
Yeah, I'm a few years out of undergrad from Chico State and just finished my master's in leadership. And so now I'm kind of looking for next steps, and I saw this opportunity to watch this panel, so I'm kind of just here getting some more info.
Fantastic.
I was gonna, I can speak for the networking piece because both Susan and Karen were both very helpful with me when I transitioned from being in a position. I was at a company in St. Louis. I probably don't need to, they're the largest rental car company. I was with them for 26 and a half years and decided I needed to do something else with my career and thought that nonprofit was the way, was probably the next step that I needed to go because I really wanted to feel like I was making a difference somewhere. And the networking piece was really important. Especially if you've been with a company for a very long time and you have not updated your resume, use your networking or your resume critiquing as a great way to kind of get in the door with somebody for networking, because that can really help spur a lot of things. But two things I was going to mention is one is if you're in a career that was compensating you very well and you're moving to non-for-profit, sometimes you have to make sure that the company the non-for-profit that you're interviewing with knows what your goals are, because they may say, oh, well, you've been there for 25 plus years. They're not even going to be interested. I'm just going to toss their resume out the door because they're just not even going to be interested. So you got to make sure that they know that, I'm a good candidate and I'm bringing in all this business experience or for-profit experience into your regimen. And then when I did my resume, I was in a position where I had been in several different like parent booster organizations with my kids. I had been on like 3 different boards, and another friend that I knew from Truman said, you need to make sure when you're doing non-for-profit, make sure you put these extracurriculars that you put in there too, because those are what they're going to ask you. Those are things that they may ask you more about in your interview than what you do, as well as they kind of help show that you're out there in the community. You're not just working in a position in your company 9 to 5 and you don't do anything out in the community, because I think those kind of things help. So
I would agree, and I would add that. So we mentioned networking, and as long as I've been in college and the workforce, I hear the word, I'm like, oh, I hate that. But you know what? Networking is as simple as finding somebody to critique your resume, and maybe that doesn't sound simple, but networking is. I'm not very good at group networking. Walking in and working a room, it's just not what I'm good at. But what I've found is that if I can get one person to talk to me, it is so easy for them to then say, well, you know what? I know Karen, and you know what? You should talk to her. She has great experience. Once you get that first slip in the door, the networking, the opportunity to talk with people and to learn from them is so much fun. And when I have been ready to make a career change or a job change, and I've started that process, the thing that I find about it is that I always wish, if I knew how this mystery ended, like if I knew how the job was going to turn out, where I'd land, it would be so much easier to even enjoy those conversations. I've made lifelong friendships, not from people who hired me, but people who I met along the way, who then I was part of their network and they would send people to me. There was a gentleman in Chicago, and he worked for kind of a business roundtable type of nonprofit. He was the most friendly, open person. He actually was from a very well-to-do, very well-known Chicago family, and he was really doing public service. And I met him at some event, and he was himself like he literally had a filing cabinet of resumes and jobs. People knew him. I'm sure now he has an email inbox, but that was back when people used filing cabinets. But people would send him resumes, and people would send him jobs and say, John, if you run across anything that would be good for this person, or John, if you would ever, see, if here's a resume, and if you see a job for this person. And he was an amazing connector and warm and friendly. And I sent people to him, and he sent them off on interviews that were just networking interviews. So, it can seem daunting, and but once you make that one or two connections, it will almost start unfolding on its own if you do the follow-up that people offer for you.
And Susan, wouldn't you say this is kind of the new networking of the last 9-10 months right here? I mean, it's, you know, the things have changed so much. It's not the going to the happy hours. It's not going to the volunteer events and meeting new people. It's, you know, attending webinars. It's attending educational types of things like this, and
Mm-hmm.
together with your friends that have other friends there that, you know, become new acquaintances to you. It's
Mm-hmm.
such a different time for being able to network now.
Mm-hmm. I think that people who are have a lot of time commitments, people who are busy professionals, now that we're all so accustomed to using tools like Zoom, even when perhaps we get back to face, I think that it will be easier for them to agree to a 20-minute, hey, I'd be happy to meet you conversation. It also provides a bit of flexibility. I think one of the hesitations that I see people who have really, really committed or quite full professional calendars is sometimes they are hesitant to set up in-person interviews because they hate to have that person drive in or travel in and then know they could be called away on short notice. And so Zoom makes it easier to both make the connection and also for them to make the commitment, because if we cancel a Zoom because of pressing need, it doesn't feel quite so horrible as when you have somebody sitting out in the entry of your building waiting to talk to you in person. So I do think it can facilitate more, and that's a good thing.
Rachel, I see Iota New 1331 here on the screen. Did you have a question?
Well, it was a few years after you guys at Truman, but it's still a fantastic organization. And Truman for a few years, and I transferred to Missouri State, and it was a chapter that hadn't had a lot of involvement for a while. So it was amazing to bring some really strong strengths from Iota New at Truman to another chapter and see how much they have grown since then. So I have a lot of love for DSP, and I have older friends from Truman and now some new friends from Kappa Omicron. So a lot of appreciation for the organization. And just again, this is kind of the networking opportunities during COVID. So I wanted to just join and see what I could gain from it, and also to meet some new people. I work for a consulting firm, and it's a women owned. I really like their mission. And then I'm in a client that's a Fortune 50 financial institute. So two very different cultures, and I can tell which one I lean towards. So again, to take some corporate experience, knowledge, and be able to do similar work. I love what I do. I'm in project management, and to take that to a more mission based organization, I think could be a good fit for me as a next step.
Mm-hmm. Your comment about really being able to get a flavor of both organizations is really terrific. I think really in any early career opportunity where you can, maybe it's an organization that's marketing to businesses and your consulting firm is providing services to other businesses, because I think it's hard to know early in career what's going to fit correctly. Some people are lucky, they find that fit right away, but not everybody does find that fit. And also, and I think we heard this from people on the call, that different stages of life and different pressures at home and just different interests may mean that different kinds of organizations are better matches for people at different points in their life. So it's really great to think about organizations and what that culture is and how it fits with where you are at that point in time.
Great. Are there any other questions from folks?
I guess this may be just a statement for the group, or maybe just a question for everyone, and not trying to sound, hopefully this doesn't sound sexist or not, but there's a female networking group that is in St. Louis called The Bridge. They're sponsored by Brown Smith Wallace, which is a large accounting firm here in St. Louis. And I find it interesting when I go to those events, when I sit at the round tables, it's usually 2/3 of the women that are sitting at the table that I'm sitting at are from nonprofits, which I find very interesting. I don't know if there's a stronger pull for women in the nonprofit or not. I don't know, maybe just different phases of life. I don't know, but has anybody else kind of noticed from a gender perspective?
I noticed for the registrants for this webinar, I believe out of 21 registered initially, I think 3, possibly 4 were men. The rest were women.
Mhm.
Again, you know, I don't think anything's right or wrong, and it's just interest levels and who paid attention to the Delta Sig calendar for webinars possibly. But to your point, this is definitely a bit more female heavy, but I think there's tons of opportunity for men and women in the nonprofit world. I assume, would you say so, Susan?
Well, I think, Amy, I would agree. I've observed this as well. And I do think it can have, depends on the type of job and the type of organization. So it just so happens that the organization that I'm part of at Washington University is our advancement office, and that includes our fundraising operation. And we are somewhat unique, which of course I didn't know when I joined the organization, and I figured it out as we went along, that it is fairly common for the fundraising parts of larger organizations, and WashU would definitely qualify as a large fundraising operation, for the fundraising team to be more male than female. Not necessarily 90-10, but more 60-40, maybe even 75-25, depending on the institution. And when you stop and think about that and think about the history of higher education, and that some very wealthy institutions in the United States didn't admit women for a very long time, some of this is part of that culture, which is their main alumni. And you think about Princeton did not admit women, I believe, until the 70s. So, very wealthy institution. But at Washington University, we are primarily female in our fundraising operation. And it's been interesting to see how, as we talk with other institutions, and you know, it's hard to pinpoint exact differences and why that is, but it does also impact the culture. So I think it's important to think about not only the type of job, and I'll say fundraising jobs are interesting jobs because they are about relationship building. So people who've been in banking who've built relationships, people who have worked in sales can build certainly good relationships. And these kind of relationships, you know, you're always a graduate of your alma mater. You don't quit the association. You may want to quit. Karen may not want that phone call every July, or, you know, the solicitation asking for Socktober. I finally got my socks for Socktober. I really like them. But so when we think about facilitating those relationships, which sometimes can include people, gifts from individuals, it's a lifelong thing. And it's really an interesting process. And I'm not a fundraiser for WashU. I'm a business person in the advancement office. But talking with fundraisers about the relationship that they've built, nobody has to make a gift. People have philanthropic interests, and we help create that intersection between their philanthropic interests and what the university has as a strength. And the people who are really good at those jobs have amazing skill sets. So that's not the same as being, you know, the person I count beans for the university, but my colleagues do just amazing work. So there are all kinds of different jobs. And I think that universities have been a place where many women earlier it diversified its workforce, and I think we still see that probably in universities and nonprofits. I do want to make a shout out to another IOTA new I see on the call, Michelle. It's great to see your name. If not there, hello, wow. So that's just really fun. It's really fun. So, you know, the power of Delta Sig, you too can be on a call somewhat later in life, and friends that you know through your own chapter show up on the screen. It's really wonderful.
Great.
Yeah,
Well, we have time for probably
good to see
about one more
everybody.
question, or, oh, go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to say, it's good to see everybody today. I'm not in a not-for-profit job, but it is very interesting to hear about all of the paths that everybody has taken. I will just add that, in the for-profit corporate side, it's been interesting, I would say, the last couple of years to kind of see how things have changed, and you can kind of explore some of those avenues, even in a for-profit job. You've seen a lot of corporations come out this year, especially during the racial injustice. And so you can, depending on your organization, you can kind of explore some of those areas and, take up some of those items, even in the corporate situation. So it can kind of be a good mix, so.
That's great. Great. Well, we are almost out of time. Susan, any closing comments or thoughts or words of wisdom to close us out with here?
Well,
If not, that's okay.
I would say that that our working lives, for many of us, go on a long time. And I think people who, and I think some of the people on this call who've made a decision that maybe I wasn't so happy in a situation and maybe want to make a change, those are really wonderful opportunities. It's not, and I've been in a couple of them where it's like, this is just not working for me and I need to think about the next thing. But if you do have that opportunity to pause and really do some networking, maybe while you're still in another opportunity that you perhaps like to leave, and give yourself the time to talk to people and to network, it can be so enriching, just that process, and you can find some great stuff along the way. So I, anticipated that my work life would go on a long time, and that's not a bad thing at all. And as much time as I'm going to put into my professional life and working for my employers, I want to know what I'm going to be able to say to myself at the end of all of that. And so, it gets back to what are the things that are important to you and what are those values that you want to think about related to your professional life. And so I think that we can find richness in lots of different organizations, and I was really happy to provide or to take this opportunity, and Shan, to thank you for offering it, because I think, as I said during the presentation, private industry often has more resources to get the word out. And so any opportunity we have to talk about this is welcome, and I really thank you for hosting this forum for us this evening.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for imparting so much wisdom and information. I know it was very helpful for everyone on here. Again, I do apologize if you had trouble getting into the Zoom. We're going to remedy that and not have that happen in the future, but sure glad you're with us. We will make this recording available tomorrow on Delta Sig University. So if you want to go back and watch it again, you are welcome to, and we'll let the others know that registered that it is there in case they missed out because of the Zoom link issue. And then we'll get the slides out that Susan mentioned. I'll get from her, we'll get that to you. And last thing, a survey will be coming your way. If you have a chance to fill that out for us in the next week, we'd sure appreciate it. And let us know what other webinars you'd like to see. We're gathering up ideas and people. If you're interested in presenting one of these webinars, I have all these IOTA new seasoned alumni with great experiences. Let me know. Would love to put you to work as well. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you on another webinar soon.
Good night. Take care.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.